All right, we are officially recording. So let me go to screen really quick. Okay. All right, can one of the panelists please confirm that my screen is visible?
Your screen is visible.
Okay, awesome. So, hello, everyone. My name is Kevin Wright. I use he, him, his pronouns. I serve as the Assistant Director for Student Diversity in the Office of Student Diversity and Social Justice. This program is called Thursday Thoughts, and it is a career and identity intersections panelist webinar. And today's topic is going to focus on culturally competent recruiting. This is a program that is in collaboration between the Office of Student Diversity and Social Justice and UNLV Career Services. So before we get started with the actual program, I just want to go over some community agreements. So first and foremost, make sure that you keep your mics muted unless you are trying to ask a question to one of the panelists. Captions are available if you actually just click on the closed caption button at the bottom of your screen through Google Meet. That will be able to be provided to you. You are more than welcome to keep your video muted. If you feel more comfortable with that, you are in no way, shape, or form obligated to show your face. But the presenters, the panelists, the moderator, myself, we may keep that on just to make sure that we are giving you the best quality of the content from the program. Ask questions in the chat just so that way everyone can see them and that way we can be on the same page and making sure that we are getting to those questions as efficiently as possible. And this session is being recorded. So if you ever have to leave early or dip out at any given time during the program, just know that there will be a recording and it will be shared on the social media accounts for Student Diversity and Social Justice as well as UNLV Career Services. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you all to the moderator of today's program. And her name is Emily Willis-Amagur, and she serves as the Graduate Assistant for Intercultural Programs in the Office of Student Diversity and Social Justice. Emily, the floor is yours.
Awesome. So welcome, everyone. I'd like to go forward and to start introducing the panelists. So our first panelist is Ida Marshood. Our second panelist we have is Miranda Dayton, and our third panelist is Justin Gomez. So the way that we're going to do this is ask you a couple questions to have you introduce yourselves. You can answer the questions, where do you work? What is your role? And what does your day-to-day look like? And if we want to start with Ida.
Hi, I work within HR. I'm a senior recruitment coordinator in recruitment. And my day-to-day is basically handling the process of recruitment, answering any questions that applicants have in regards to their uploads of resumes, cover letters, any clarifications on the job descriptions posted. We also help our faculty and staff in the process of recruitment and answer any of the questions that they have in regards to that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll go to Miranda.
Hi, I'm Miranda. I'm a senior recruiter with the Peace Corps, and I work with interested community members in Utah, Nevada, and Idaho to help them through the application process of Peace Corps. And I also work with some of our university programs.
Thank you, Miranda. Thank you for joining us. And finally, Justin.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Justin Gomez. I use he or they pronouns. I work in career services, actually. I'm the assistant director for career and professional development. And then I also have a side hustle, or it's essentially my side hustle, where I provide consultation and facilitation services in diversity, equity, inclusion, and cultural intelligence. And so in both of my roles, well, at UNLV, essentially my day-to-day looks like helping to provide coaching and helping to develop tools and resources so that people can kind of go about their job search. And then My other role, since it's my side hustle, it's more about getting contracts for facilitation, but really that looks like, well, before COVID-19, it was actually going in person and doing workshops and helping to train employees, you know, kind of introduce them to the concepts of diversity, inclusion, unconscious bias, and kind of help them with that kind of work. Now it's look more like doing it over Zoom and doing it more over virtual means. So I think that sums up my day-to-day.
Great. And thank you so much. We're so grateful to have all three of you. So we're going to jump into the first question. And since the topic of this whole program is culturally competent recruiting, the first question is, what does cultural competent mean? And this can go to any of the panelists that want to give their definition of cultural competency and what it means.
I'll start. So for us, we feel understanding, participating in the university's commitment towards diversity, equity, and inclusion, just getting involved is what our cultural competency means to us. I know that the Office of Diversity Initiatives is leading a task force committed to addressing concerns of Black faculty and staff. And actually, our VP of Human Resources is heading that task force. So we really want to make sure that we're doing what we can to sort of expand the cultural competence of UNLV in the best of our ability from HR. And yeah, thank you.
Did anyone want to add on to that definition?
Sure, I can add a bit to that. So I would say the way that I usually talk about cultural competency is from the perspective of kind of understanding the why behind the way people do things or groups of people do things, because that's really where culture kind of comes in. And so I kind of think about it not so much about how much I know about other cultures, but how I know how some of them are similar or different, and kind of taking it from that lens of just understanding that while things might not make sense to me based on my own culture and my own cultural values, preferences, that I adapt and try to understand why other people from different cultural backgrounds, whether it's within their organization or in their communities, or if it's national culture, whatever the culture is, that I kind of understand why they decide to go about it in that particular way.
And I would also add respecting other people's cultures. So not just understanding that other people come from a different background, but respecting that their culture is as valuable as your culture is, and helping create a space where everyone can feel valued and feel like where they're coming from is important.
Thank you. I think definitely all three of those insights around cultural competency is going to help us kind of move forward with the rest of the conversation. So the next questions are about like the role of individual. So what role do an individual's values play in the recruitment process?
So I think what's really important is to understand that whether known or unknown, sometimes we make decisions based on our own perceptions and assumptions about people who we are unfamiliar with, and we must disrupt this behavior in order to facilitate a fair and inclusive recruitment process. And actually, UNLV does offer workshops to help facilitate the change, and a lot of that comes from Office of Faculty Affairs. So they have like a dialogues workshop which explores how we as individuals develop our own identities, the perceived identities of others related to gender, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status. We do a best practices in faculty recruitment training. We partner with Dr. Kendricks, and we have a specific area dedicated to removing bias from the evaluation process. And actually, the Office of Faculty Affairs can customize training for faculty in terms of if there's training in specific areas that they want to understand a little bit better.
In our hiring process, it's a little bit different because our applicant pool is a national applicant pool, and we're trying to hire as many people as we can with diverse backgrounds because we really want to highlight that in our hiring and highlight the diversity of America in our volunteer pool. So having an individual value set or an individual experience really is a benefit for us when we're doing the interview process, showing that you have some idea of how to do intercultural work, how to engage with people who aren't like you, who either internationally or here in the States, so that when you get to country, because all of our positions are overseas, you can be more comfortable with that and not learning how to do it right from day one, but have somewhat of a background there. So for my agency, it's great to have some experience working with people who aren't like you.
Okay.
So, I was going to. So I would say that I'm thinking that this is probably from the job seeker's perspective, like how do their values come into the recruitment process? I think it's really important to do sort of an inventory, and I don't mean like actually, I mean, you could actually do inventories on this to figure out kind of like what your core values are and what your cultural values are. But I think I would recommend to job seekers that they have a pretty good idea of what are the things that are important for them when they're seeking employment. So what things do they value in terms of, like, for example, for me, like family is really important, right? So when I'm looking for, or when I go about looking for a job, I know that, you know, I want to make sure, like, you know, if I don't have any children right now, but if in the future I decide to become a parent or something like that, and my identity shifts, is the company that I'm going to be work for be supportive of me being able to be a parent? Or, for example, like caring for my dad who has dementia, right? If I need to take them to a doctor's appointment or something like that, and I need to take a little bit of time off from work, will there be flexibility in my schedule to be able to allow that? Some companies can do that, some of them can't. But I need to understand kind of what things are important to me based on my responsibilities, based on my values. And I think maybe going through the recruitment process is a really great time for you to know those things for yourself, but being able to ask them for the company, and do they have actual policies that support them, not just like your supervisor saying, yeah, that would be okay. But, you know, things happen, people move on. And if you are still working for the company, you want to know that there's actual policies there that support you. So I would say the sooner that you can, and sometimes those values will evolve. So even if you don't know all of them right now, but at least having an idea of what might be important to you. And I also think, and maybe I'm going ahead a little bit, so I'll just wait and then go from there.
Thank you. And so the next question is, how can candidates participate like authentically in this recruitment process, right? Because I know, at least from like perspective of a candidate that's going into a job, whether it's like the process is like an interview or what have you, it can be very scary. And so how can folks feel that they're presenting as like their best and realest selves?
And then this is obviously on the side for us. We feel that if you highlight your accomplishments and be specific about your qualifications, because what we want to do and promote is to hire someone based off of their qualifications. So if someone comes in and let's say they know they did research on the person that they're interviewing with and has that common ground with that person, that would be great. But if you're not able to answer those questions in regards to the job, that's something that is going to be the most authentic way to present yourself, and the best way to present yourself is to make sure that you want to research, you know, the company you're coming for, understand your resume, make sure you have examples for, you know, for those for those specific qualifications in the job description, and make sure you read the job description thoroughly and be prepared. I can't stress that enough, because we have had, there are people that aren't prepared and they come into a job interview thinking that they can just connect on a personal level and just have the job in the bag. And that's not bringing your best self, and that's not even bringing your authentic self. It's really important to make sure that you focus on those qualifications, because that's what we're going to be focusing on, is whether or not you can do the job based on the questions that we ask. And those questions are going to be based off of the job description that we provide. So I think that that's really, really important going into the job interview, in my opinion, or going through the recruitment process, starting with that job interview.
I would definitely agree. Like, being prepared for an interview is going to be one of the best things you can do. And then practice telling the stories that show the qualities you want to highlight. Look at those recommendations, or look at the qualifications, figure out what you have done in the past that are really going to highlight that, and then practice telling that story to somebody so that you're not just making it up as you go. And then remember, like, you're not the only one being interviewed, you're interviewing them as well. So if it's not a good fit, that's okay. But you need to feel like they're a good fit for you as much as they're looking to make sure you're a good fit for them.
So I think that, going through the recruiting process, I think requires that cultural competence, right? Because every organization that you interview for is going to have different systems and different processes. Like, if you are coming to work for Enchi, they use Workday for their recruitment process, which could at times feel just a system itself, not even the actual process of going through getting to the interview and that piece. It can feel like a barrier. I mean, I know that, for example, when I submitted my job application through Workday, it was probably one of the most challenging application systems I've used to submit a job application. And I know people, particularly as I'm working with students sometimes, or even alumni, they get frustrated by some of the systems that, companies use in their recruitment process, and that becomes a barrier because they don't know how to do something, right? So, what I would say in terms of being able to present your best and realest self is, I always recommend that they ask questions, right? I tell them, I said, the HR people, the recruitment people, they're there to help you and they're there to support you. So if you have questions, if there's things that, don't feel like you have to solve it on your own. I know it's hard, because sometimes I think some of our students come from cultural backgrounds where it's like, I need to do it myself. I need to do it on my own. I need to be able to solve it. But I think one of the ways that you can really present your best and realest self is being able to ask for help, right? Or asking for clarification, even when that might not be the easiest thing to do. And I would say that, yes, I think, while you can be prepared, but I think about this too. I was recently, I've been watching Sugar Rush, that competition on Netflix where people are competing, right? And so there's all these really amazing pastry chefs. And I know that many of them are probably really amazing and could probably win these competitions if they had more time. However, they have to learn how to work within that 3-hour time frame to get to the first 2 rounds and then make it to the final round. So I think, kind of going about the job search process is very similar. You might be the best at what it is that you do. You might have really amazing qualifications, but really it's how well can you do in this interview? Or how well can you perform in this search process? And so it requires, one, again, that cultural competency. It requires a little bit of a lot of adaptability to understand that how you perform in your current job or how you perform in other job interviews is not necessarily what's going to work in this particular one, right? Because coming into UNLV might be very different than going into the Peace Corps. So I would say, one, asking questions and being adaptable are probably ways that you can continue to present your best and realest self.
Awesome, thank you. And a couple of you touched a little bit on the next question, but does anyone want to elaborate more on how can candidates assess the fit between themselves and their identities / values and their potential employer? during the recruitment process?
Yeah, I touched a little bit on the research the employer, jot things down that you find interesting that you may want to ask in the interview. And one of the things that you more than likely, if you're interviewing at UNLV, a good percentage of the questions that are asked is, tell us what you know about our organization, right? So if you don't know anything about the organization or about the strides that we've made or anything, it's gonna seem like you're not that interested in the job there. That you're just looking for a job just to get a job. And a lot of times we're looking for people who want to be here long term, and we want to make sure that people are interested and they're excited and a little nervous about getting the job interview, because it's an exciting time. It's an exciting situation. Also, I cannot stress this enough. I've only been at UNLV for a year, but previously I worked at a recruiting firm, and both times it never fails. I have to say this. Please ask questions. When they say, do you have any questions for us? Please ask questions. I mean, talk about what the department goals are, career path, culture, thoughts on diversity, mentorships. Like Justin had previously mentioned, how's your family, like the culture of life, work-life balance. How is work-life balance here? Just to get a gauge as to if you do have kids in the future, or if you are caring for an ill parent, you want to make sure that work-life balance is there, that they appreciate your time, if that's something that's important to you. Or if you're looking for something that, like, I know there's some tech jobs that you work 60 hours a week, and if it's something that you're okay with, to get your foot in the door, maybe you want to know what the career path is for that. So you understand, yeah, it's going to be 60 hours a week for your first year, but maybe you'll go up on the ladder, and you'll end up being a manager, not working as many hours, or being a supervisor, or increasing to like an analyst 2 or something. So it's one of those things where, like, I really can't stress it enough that it's so important to ask those questions. Also, on a side note, we, like, for internal applicants for like UNLV, and I think this is kind of across, like, it can be taken for every company. Just because you're an internal candidate, do not assume that you have the job. Please, you have to still compete for the job. You're competing with other people that are just as qualified as you are. You need to set yourself apart as if this is a brand new situation. You don't know anybody there, and you need to, show that you can do this job, and not that you're just gonna have it. And I think that actually can, that's a blanket thing maybe for everybody who thinks that they have something in the bag. Not the case for most people, because there's only one, there's only one job. A bunch of people are interviewing for that one job. Only one person is getting that job. So to come with that mentality is not going to help you at all. But yeah, that's what I have to say about that. Thanks.
I would add, pay attention to some of the nonverbal things that you see around you. How do people engage with the administrative assistants? How do people engage with the receptionists? What sort of questions are they asking you? Are the things they're asking you things that you value? How do people engage with each other on the panel? Like, is that a situation that you see yourself being comfortable in if you were in that situation? To get an idea of what the culture of that company is for people who are already there and are personally engaging.
So yes, I do agree with what Dave shared. And I would even say that I think researching the company, yes, you can find out tons of information online, but before you submit your application, if you have the opportunity to reach out to anybody who works at the company, they might be willing to do like an informational interview with you and share some additional insight. You don't need a lot of time, maybe 10 or 15 minutes. We're not necessarily asking about the job, but just asking about the company itself and like the work-life balance and those other things that matter, not on your day-to-day work, but in your day-to-day life, because life is happening too while you're also doing your career, right? And so I think, getting that information can be useful, I think, as you're going through the process, right? Because again, thinking about culture from the perspective of the way that companies and organizations do things, I think that that's super helpful for you to know. And definitely, yeah, read up about the news. What's coming out about the company? What are they involved in? And then also if you're going out of state or you're going to another country, or that, the organization is more global, be thinking about the communities that they're in and how are they involved in those communities. Because if you are relocating to go and live in that community, right, what kind of relationship, is the community happy to have that company there? Has there been a lot of issues, so at least kind of have an understanding of what they're, what how they fit into where they are located to, I think are all things that, if you need to live in that community, you want to make sure people are going to be happy, that you are living in that community and being a part of it. So I think those are all things that kind of go in to assessing fit. And I also don't like using the word cultural fit, because I think that might not necessarily, I think more about mutual fit, because I think cultural fit tends to say like, oh, if my culture doesn't align with that of the organization, I'm not going to be successful there. But I think thinking about it more from a mutual fit, it's kind of like, okay, both of them have to align, versus just like the cultural fit. It's like either you fit or you don't. And I don't think that that's necessarily always the case.
Well, thank you. I definitely think a lot of those answers will be able to help students and anyone be able to navigate, the recruitment process. So the next part of our questions are basically from the standpoint of an actual employer. So what aspects of cultural competency do you believe that employers still struggle with?
So I think the struggle is that people in general don't know, just don't know what aspects. Oh, they just struggle. I think they just struggle with it in general. I think that, we all have unconscious bias, and we just need to be aware of that and disrupt that. And I think there is, Harvard has an implicit bias test survey question thing, and I know I personally took it, and it kind of showed me some of my implicit biases that I have based off of how I grew up, based off of my experiences, kind of formed what my biases were. So being able to understand that no matter who you are, and no matter how educated you think you have in terms of the cultural competency, I think it's very important to look at yourself and go, I might have a conscious bias. I should figure out what are those biases and disrupt them. I think companies they fall into this a little bit more often than individuals do. I think that we are moving towards becoming more aware of the struggle and becoming more aware of where we're at. Than we were ever before. I don't think this was ever a conversation like even 10 years ago, 5 years ago. It's becoming more of a conversation now, and it's becoming more important to understand that.
So I think an aspect of this, I think that employers still struggle with, is perhaps understanding what policies or systems they have in place, and who do those systems and policies benefit, and who do they not help, or who's not helped or benefited by those kinds of systems and policies that they have in place. And so I think, yes, on an interpersonal level, we all have implicit biases. And so because we as humans have them, our systems and policies that we set up in place also reflect those biases that we have. And then they kind of become the invisible culture, or the invisible way to kind of get things done. So for example, I think about the process of going to grad school and like getting a PhD. I'm a first generation student, and when I first started out, I thought that it was an objective process, that it's kind of like undergrad somewhat, where you apply, they look at your high school performance, or I guess like your college performance in this case, and they determine whether or not you get to go to do a PhD or something like that. As I did my informational interviewing and learn more about the process, I realized it's about fit. You have to reach out to faculty. You have to find out, one, if they're willing to accept students and mentor them. Do your research interests align? And like, there's this whole unwritten, there's apparently a whole book of codes that's unwritten that nobody really knows about, but that kind of goes, that factors into whether or not you can actually get in. So it doesn't matter if you're the smartest, you're the best, you had the best GRE, GMAT scores, all of those things. At the end of the day, what matters is, again, and this is in every case, so I don't want to say that this is the case with every PhD program out there, but I began to realize that different universities, different institutions had different processes in terms of how they selected PhD students. So yeah, I think that that's something that employers, and even in grad school, I think organizations still struggle with.
I would also add that a lot of times organizations have really good intentions, but they don't have the training or understanding on how to make that work right. And so instead of being a process that is helpful and actually achieves the goal that they're looking for, they make a list with check boxes, and they forget the human side of it as well. And so that, I think, is something that people are starting to realize and working to get rid of, but it's something that is in place still in a lot of organizations.
And so, does anyone want to share any examples of like effective recruitment strategies that you've seen that were rooted in cultural competency, equity, and inclusion?
I can definitely share some things that we've that were implemented before me and that have been improved upon as I've been here and I've seen, like forming a diverse search committee. So I don't know how familiar a lot of people are with search committees, but it's basically it's a committee that's made up of at least 3 to, depending on the bylaws, could be 10, 15 people. There's a search chair, and there is something that we are looking into or sort of adopting. I think it was the University of Oregon, is search advocates that we're also going to be implementing. And I think that with the new chancellor, who I believe is from Oregon, they implemented it there. I think it's going to be something that will be implemented maybe NGY, but I know that UNLV is striving to make sure that that is implemented so that we can continue to have those diverse search committees and continue to have people that are there to make sure that the conversation steers back to the person's qualifications and their job qualifications. We've also, included like outreach to specific minority serving institutions, organization, peers, etc. Evaluating, and then we do implement these rating where you base these rubrics off of a candidate's qualification. So you have like, how well do they answer this question, to what ability, and it's ranked. So then anybody with the highest total or totals would be moving on, not based off of just a singular view of their resume. They will break it down for the review process. They'll break it down in the interview process, phone interview, in person, well, now virtual interviews, no in-person interviews for some time. And the hope is, if the above is achieved, if all these things are, the diverse search committee, they do the outreach, they evaluate the candidates based off of their job qualifications and how well they answer, the questions that are provided about the job description. The hope is that the hiring decisions will be based on the best qualified candidate, and that would, have that equity and inclusion and that competency just in there, because we are trying to do, what we're trying to do is make sure that candidates are are based off of like their job qualifications. So yeah, these are the things that we've recommended. And we're always improving. We're also trying to get better at that, and involve in a lot of the conferences about diversity and inclusion. There's a couple coming up in recruitment, and heavily involved in getting into that, so we can implement more and more things and get more and more ideas to be better. Because that's the point, right? You always want to do better. Just because you're doing something and hoping that it goes according to plan, like we talked about the struggle, there's this invisible sort of struggle. So we just always want to do better. We always want to break those barriers. We always want to strive to do the best that we can. So, thank you.
And thinking about this sort of thing from the very beginning of the process, and not just when you get to the applicants, how you write the job listing is going to change who can apply to it. So are you looking for a skill set, or are you looking for a degree? Because a lot of positions don't actually need a degree, they need a skill set. So by requiring certain things, you're going to cut out a group of people who might be really great for the position. So keeping that in mind as well, I've seen has been really effective.
Yes, so I know when I was coming in for, when I applied and then started moving through the recruitment process for the job I currently have at UNLV now, it was different. And I mean, it was different in a good way, because I think it wasn't perfect, but it was definitely one of the more inclusive recruitment processes that I had been through as a candidate. And I have interviewed with a number of universities before. And I think when I actually came for my on-campus interview, and I met with the recruitment specialist that I was working with, they kind of they spent the first 30 minutes of my interview day kind of like going over, here's what to look forward to today. Here's what you should expect. If any of these things, like they had already told me, like, here are big no-nos for the people who are interviewing you. If any of these things happen, like, here's my cell phone number. Here's how you reach me today if you need me, if something happens, and that was really different than any other institution that I had ever interviewed for, where somebody actually said, like, here are questions that you're not supposed to be asked today by any of the people who are recruiting you, because these would be questions that would be indicating explicit bias in that case, right? And so I thought that it was really great for them to openly kind of address that. And then at the end of the day, once I wrapped up all of my interviews, they kind of had like a little process where they checked in and said, okay, nobody asked you this, none of this happened, and I thought that was really a really great way for them to be transparent and encourage me to, again, be kind of open and honest. And so anyway, I ended up getting the job and ended up coming to work here. So that worked out really well for me. I would also say, though, I've been a part of recruiting kind of student assistants, student workers, peer educators. And I'll give an example of something that happened that was really simple, but that completely shifted how our recruitment process went. So when I was working at Cal Poly, we used to hire about 15 to 20 peer academic advisors every year. And whenever we would go through the process, we would look at resumes and you invite people to interview. So we didn't realize that we had, I guess, that we had a huge, or what the issues were. So one year we just decided to do blind resume review. And what I mean by that is that we just decided to look at the resumes, but not have candidates include their names on the resume. And what ended up happening was like 99% of the candidates all happened to identify as being women or female. And that had never, ever happened before. And it was just really interesting, like, what happened? Like, what about not looking at the name? Like, what was impacting whether or not how many people who identified as men or male? Anyway, I don't know what happened, but I just wanted to kind of share that, we were trying to use what we were learning in these disrupting bias in the hiring process training. So we implemented something, and then it kind of changed what our whole talent pool kind of looked like for that particular position. In that particular year, we only ended up getting one guy on the whole team. It wasn't a bad thing, but that had never ever happened before. We had always had sort of a pretty good mixed gender team, and that kind of shifted a little bit. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of share about how, like, implementing these strategies can sometimes change, right? Maybe before, maybe more women were not encouraged to, or maybe trans folks were not encouraged to want to apply and be a part of that team. But by being transparent about the fact that when you submit your resume, you don't have to put your name on it, and we wouldn't know anything about you in terms of besides what you are listing as your qualifications, could make a difference in whether or not you get an interview and then ultimately get hired.
Awesome. Okay, so our last round of questions are just regarding resources and recommendations. So what resources do you recommend in order for someone to become more culturally competent when interacting with various communities and stakeholders?
So I know that for faculty, we have resources. Recruitment has resources for the faculty and how to recommend how to make sure that they're more culturally competent. And they were just some of the things I had mentioned on the previous question. And I didn't mention this in the last question, but I think it's actually pretty interesting for this. When we do, and I don't know how known this is for the best practices in faculty recruitment training, we actually did implement a skit to show what not to do and what to do in informal interviews at restaurants. And we actually had, we were fortunate enough that the theater, the faculty for theater, they were able to do that for us. And I think it actually opened up a lot of eyes. I think a lot of times that we as individuals, we don't know that we have these biases. We don't know what we're doing, what we're projecting sometimes. So to see it is very important. And like I mentioned, the implicit bias test survey from Harvard is one of the resources I would recommend. I would actually recommend taking that first before anything, just so you know what your implicit bias is. And then that way you know what you need to do or what you can do or the resources to use to disrupt that. So yeah, for faculty and staff, like I said, we have like the dialogue workshop, the best practices in faculty recruitment training, things like that. And we're always, the recruitment team, always available to answer any questions, whether it's applicants, whether it's staff and faculty. If there's anybody that needs questions answered, we're here. And in terms of communities, we're hoping that our best foot put forward in the way that we handle things, we're hoping that that radiates throughout and hits the communities in a positive way. Because I know, especially now, we are in it together. You know, COVID kind of showed us, and even previously with a lot of the things that have happened in Vegas, this is such a strong community, and we're actually more diverse than I think a lot of people understand outside of Vegas. So we you know, we want to make sure that we're including everybody and that everybody is heard and can understand like what they have, what they can do, and not to limit anybody based off of anything that they feel is holding them back, or you know. So I feel like the implicit bias test is so important to take. I've rambled. I'm so sorry. But yeah, that's my answer to that question.
I would say that those immersive experiences are really important, whether or not they're happening on campus or whether or not they're happening out in the community or UNLV is providing them for you. So I definitely think, I don't want to use the term trial by fire, but like getting out there and learning how to interact with people from different cultural backgrounds is probably, I mean, the best way for you to learn how to interact with people from different backgrounds. And, you know, sometimes I think people think like, oh, I need to go abroad, like I need to go. And that if you can afford that, if that's an opportunity, if that's an option for you, going and immersing yourself in another country and in another culture is a good way to do that. Or is a way to do that. I don't know if it's the best way to do that, because like Ada was saying that there is culture here in Las Vegas. Like, I mean, we live in one of the most diverse cities in the country. I mean, we're at one of the most diverse universities in the country also. But if you are only staying in the little circle that you're in, you know, like, check out the SDSJ programming and events that they're offering, right? If you want to, I think another way to become more culturally competent is to become an ally to different communities, right? And so I would say, well, any opportunity, even if it's like, I don't know if they have national student exchange at UNLV, you know, where you can like go and earn credit for UNLV while being at another university in the US, do that. And I would also say that for students, I really want to encourage you to apply for things. Sometimes even when you don't think that you might be qualified for them, it's not your job to reject you. It's whoever you're applying to for something, it's their job to reject you. So, you know, don't be afraid. I know that I struggle with that kind of imposter syndrome. Like I said, being a first gen student, you know, like I always used to look at things and be like, I don't think that I'm going to be able to do that. And then the one time I decided to, like, somebody told me that to, like, well, just apply and let them reject you. I ended up getting a really great opportunity to go participate in like a leadership program that flew me out halfway across the country to go do it. And it didn't cost me anything besides applying, right? And so sometimes don't just look at it and say, oh, I don't think, unless you really aren't qualified. But if you know, like, you know, talk to somebody. That's the thing. Don't think you have to do everything on your own. Ask for help. There's me, there's career coaches, there's Kevin over in SDSJ, there's people here, you know, whose job it is to kind of help you. So I would say that asking for help can actually help you be more culturally competent, and then also be confident to kind of navigate some of these communities, opportunities as well.
I was going to say the exact same thing. Like, get out and meet people and talk to people and actually listen when you're talking to somebody. And if you catch something in your head that sounds wrong or like a bias, then mark that in your mind and be like, okay, next time I'm going to work on that. And just like get out there and talk to people and engage with your community.
Okay. I think that was all really great advice, especially for everyone's going to be watching this back. The last question was just any final words of advice that you would want to share about culturally competent recruiting to the attendees that are going to be watching this?
I would say apply for anything you want. Don't hold yourself back. There are lots of opportunities out there. There are lots of positions that you can apply to. And like was already said, like it's not your job to say no, it's your job to try. So make it happen for yourself the best you can.
Yeah, I would agree. You know, and just to touch on what Justin has said, you know, ask for help. There are resources there for you. And I know at UNLV, we're committed to making, you know, diversity inclusion a very important thing for us when hiring. And I think that it's important to note that we're not the only ones that are committed to that. We are all moving into that direction, and to not feel like you might not get the job because of you don't think you're qualified enough, or like Justin said, don't reject yourself before, you know, you apply. You just have to apply. You have to hope for the best. I mean, I experienced the same thing as Justin, and I applied for UNLV. I didn't think I was going to get the job, and I just applied on a whim. I am an alumnus. Like, I went to UNLV. That's what I got my undergrad at UNLV, and it's so nice to come back full circle and, you know, don't think that you're not going to be able or you're not good enough or anything, because you are. I worked through that. I was good enough to apply and I got the job. So, you know, just believe in yourself, have that self-confidence. That's going to take you so far, just having that self-confidence in yourself.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point. And I would say sometimes even when you don't feel as confident in yourself, like still, I don't know, just like, I know in like my culture, they'd be like, échale ganas, you know, like just like do it, you know. Like at least that's what my dad would tell me. And so I mean, that's how I got into grad school. Like, I cannot tell you, like, I was like, oh my God, my GRE scores, like, I don't think I'm going to get into this PhD program, but I'm like, I'm going to try anyway. Right. And I did, and I got in, and I know that I'm on here, I'm like, you know, so I would say that sometimes the rejections, you know, kind of use them as a redirection and get comfortable with them. You know, particularly for me, like, I take rejection kind of hard, but you know, when I apply and don't get a job or don't get an opportunity, like, I use it as a way to learn how to build up my resilience with that, and learn how to be comfortable with not getting something and taking it kind of as a learning opportunity.
I'd also put a plug in for Career Services. Like, they're there to help you. They'll help you.
Thank you.
Like, seriously, it's a great resource. And then also remember to describe yourself the way someone who really loves you would describe yourself. Like, you know, all the little bits that aren't necessarily great, but like, how would your grandma describe you if you have a good relationship with your grandma? Like, and then describe yourself that way. Like, give yourself the benefit of the doubt.
Well, that's all great. Oh my goodness. So what I hear is apply. Okay. So I believe that's all the questions that we have, since we don't have any live audience. But I want to thank you all again so much for serving on this panel, and to shout out to UNLV Career Services and University and Social Justice. We have a website, YouTube, and social media to be able to contact both these offices at UNLV. Kevin, I don't know if you wanted to say anything as we wrap up.
Yes, thank you to the panelists for this session. Really appreciate it. Love the insight, love the advice. I was actually taking notes the entire time. But yes, this was wonderful. And yeah, that's essentially our session. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and then go back. So yeah, thank you all so much. And then for the folks that watch this recording, this will be available on YouTube channels for Career Services and Student Diversity and Social Justice. And this will be happening every Thursday in September. And next week's topic will actually focus on negotiation. But then furthermore, we're going to also expand Thursday Thoughts into the respective identity months of our program coordinators within the Office of Student Diversity and Social Justice. So also stay tuned for a Thursday Thoughts session that centers the Latinx community for Latinx Heritage Month, which starts September 15th, as well as for next month, LGBTQ+ Pride Month. So there will be a Thursday Thought session that centers around the queer and trans community as well. But yes, love this partnership between our respective offices, and we're all good to go. Okay.